Привет, and welcome back to our podcast, Frenemies or Sister Nations, Russia, Ukraine and Belarus. Today we are diving deep into the heart of national identity, culture. Join me, as always, are Anastasia and Simone.
Today I'm stepping into the role of head taster and critic, so get ready.
We've got 4 big topics on the agenda, and we're starting with the things that bring people together and set them off the fastest: food and music.
Simone, when you think of our food, what's the first thing that pops into your head, honestly?
Well, borscht, obviously. But I'm too scared to ask who owns it because I don't want to start World War III at the dinner table.
Wise choice. Borscht is definitely a bone of contention. In Ukraine, it's a thick, hearty soup, often with beans, and always served with pambushki, that is, soft bread rolls smothered in garlic. It's a literal cult there. While in Russia, it might be a bit lighter, but usually without beans, but always with a massive dollop of sour cream.
By the way, in Belarus we have our own version called холодник. It's like cold beet soup made with kefir or kvass. It's perfect for a hot summer day, but let's be real. If we are talking about Belarus, we are talking about potatoes.
Oh, I've heard legends about Belarusian draniki, but how are they different from just regular potato pancakes?
Oh, Simone, it's an art form. Real draniki are made by grating potatoes on a very fine grater until they are almost like a pulp. Ideally, you don't add flour, just salt and maybe an egg. And then you just fry them. They end up being silky on the inside and incredibly crispy on the outside. Also, you may add a little bit of sour cream on them. And then there is machanka, a thick, savory sauce made with homemade sausages and ribs, which you dip pancakes into.
Actually, potatoes are huge in Ukraine too, but the real kings of the table are varyeniki. These are dumplings filled with cherries, sweet curd, or potatoes with shkvarki, that is, fried pork fat. And, of course, chicken Kiev, which must have a cold piece of herb butter inside that flows out the moment you cut into it.
That sounds like a delicious calorie bomb. But what about Russia? Is it all about pelmeni?
Exactly. Pelmeni are a Siberian classic, thinned off and a lot of seasoned meat. But I'd also highlight blini. In Russian tradition, these aren't just the crepes. They're eaten with caviar, salted fish, or mushrooms, and especially during Maslenitsa, that is, the sun-welcoming festival.
So the base is similar, dough, meat, veggies, but the accents are different. For Ukrainians, it's about juiciness and garlic. For Belarusians, it's the magic of the potato. And for Russians, it's about scale and love for pastry and fillings.
Okay, the food talk is making me hungry. What about the dancing? I've seen videos of guys doing these incredible high jumps. Where's that from?
Oh, that's the hopak. It's a Ukrainian Cossack dance, and it's pure adrenaline. Split jumps, deep squats. The dancer looks like he's defying gravity. It's a dance really of freedom and strength.
Belarusian dances are quite different. Take Lavoniha, for example. It's more rhythmic, earthy and playful, but without those extreme acrobatic stunts. It's a community dance where the collective rhythm and fast footwork are what matter most.
What about the Russian kalinka? That's the one everyone knows.
Definitely, but don't forget the хоровод, or circle dance. In Russia, folk dance is often about scale and patterns. When the women dance, it's incredibly smooth. They look like they're floating on water. But when the men join, then it's all about wide arm movements, power, and theatricality.
Speaking of rhythm, let's move to music. Simone, I bet you've heard some modern hits from our region on Spotify.
Of course. It feels like the borders in music are completely gone now.
Exactly. If we look at the old school icons, Belarus gave the world Pisnary. They were a legendary Soviet folk rock band. Nowadays, it's Lepis Trubetskoy with their rebellious punk rock, or Max Korsh, who sells out stadiums all across Europe.
Ukraine is having an incredible musical boom right now. You have legends like Okeanelze, whose songs everyone knows by heart, but there's also modern electro-folk like Go A. Do you remember them from Eurovision? Well, yes, they mix ancient wet voice singing with heavy techno, and it's such a fresh sound.
And Russia? Anastasia, who are the icons there now?
Well, for 90s nostalgia, it's Ruki Vierch, and people still dance to them at every wedding. But the modern scene then is dominated by a massive rap culture, from Oxymoron, who is now in exile and labeled a foreign agent, to pop phenoms like Zivert.
Pretty interesting. It seems music isn't just about the melody anymore, but also about taking a stand, right?
Absolutely. Many musicians from all three countries are now scattered across the globe. Music has become a way to talk about pain, searching for home, and the price of freedom.
And that's a perfect bridge to our next topic. We've talked about the body and the taste buds. Now let's move to the mind and soul, so literature, cinema, and sports. Let's start with Russia.
Yes, Russian literature seems to hold a unique place in world culture. It's often described as deeply psychological and existential. But what makes it so distinctive?
When we talk about Russian literature, we are not simply talking about novels or poems. We are talking about a tradition that constantly questions the human soul, morality, fate, power, and identity. It has always been deeply connected to the historical crisis of the country. And, well, we can identify four major phases. The first is the Golden Age of the 19th century. Everything begins with Alexander Pushkin, considered the father of modern Russian literary language.
With him, Russian became a mature, elegant language, and after Pushkin came monumental figures like Nikolai Gogol with his grotesque satire, Fyodor Dostoevsky, who explores psychological conflict, guilt, and the relationship with God, Lev Tolstoy with his vast moral and epic narratives, and as well as Ivan Turgenev and Mikhail Lermontov.
Exactly. This was the century of realism, but not a purely descriptive realism. It was philosophical and spiritual. Literature became almost a moral guide for society.
However, at the turn of the century, Europe was entering a period of experimentation and artistic rupture. Did Russian literature follow the same direction?
Yes, at the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century, the Silver Age emerged a period of extraordinary poetic flourishing. This was the era of Russian modernism. One movement was symbolism, represented by Alexander Blok, aimed at going beyond visible reality. Then came Futurism, a radical movement represented by Vladimir Mayakovsky. They experimented with language and rhythm.
Wait, wasn't Futurism also huge in Italy?
Yes, but the difference with Italian Futurism was their refusal for the war. Mayakovsky in his poem War is Declared writes, "To the crowded, monstrous city came in a dream, the bass voice of cackling cannon. Red snow was falling from the west, into juicy shreds of human flesh." Alongside them was Acmeism, with Anna Akhmatova and Osip Mandelstam, who reacted against the excessive mysticism of symbolism and sought clarity and precision.
But then came 1917 and the Soviet regime. Literature came under state control, and socialist realism became the official doctrine. Writers were expected to portray the idea of Soviet hero. Many were censored or persecuted. Akhmatova was silenced. Marina Tsvetaeva lived in exile. Mikhail Bulgakov criticized the system through allegory in The Master and Margarita. Boris Pasternak faced repression for Dr. Zhivago. And leader Alexander Solzhenitsyn exposed the horrors of the Gulag. Writing became an act of resistance.
And what happened after the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991? Did artistic freedom generate a new golden era?
In theory, it should have. Official censorship disappeared, but many critics speak of crisis of originality. The great ideological tension disappeared. Contemporary writers like Viktor Pelevin, Vladimir Sorokin, Lyudmila Ulitskaya, and Gozel Yakhina are important voices experimenting with postmodernism. But literature lacks the central cultural role it once had. Today, the writer is often a disillusioned observer.
What about Ukrainian literature? Anna, you often say it reflects imperial tensions in Russia. What about Ukraine?
If Russian literature reflects imperial tensions, Ukrainian literature is deeply connected to the struggle for cultural survival.
True. Its roots go back to the medieval state of Kievan Rus between the 11th and 13th centuries, with religious texts in Church Slavonic. After the Mongol invasion, it declined but revived in the 16th and 17th centuries. A key turning point was 1798 with Eneida by Ivan Kotlyarevsky. It was a satirical adaptation of Virgil's Aeneid that transformed classical eras into Ukrainian Cossacks, and most importantly, it was written in vernacular Ukrainian.
In the 19th century, the central figure became Taras Shevchenko, who used poetry as cultural resistance against imperial Russian rule. Later, writers like Lesya Ukrainka and Vasil Stefanik explored psychological depth and social issues.
The 20th century was tragic. After a brief flourishing in the 1920s, writers under the Soviet Union were forced into socialist realism. Many were imprisoned or executed during Stalin's purges, the executed Renaissance. But it survived. And today, contemporary authors explore themes of memory, identity, and post-Soviet transformation.
We must also talk about Belarusian literature. It's less known internationally, but has very deep roots. Well, it begins with oral folk poetry, and then written literature started after the adoption of Christianity in 988. Chronicles were written in Polotsk in the 12th and 13th centuries. Under the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, Old Belarusian became the official language and the statutes of the Grand Duchy were created.
A massive figure is Franciszek Skaryna, who in the early 16th century printed 23 books of the Bible in Old Belarusian. In the 19th century, Adam Mickiewicz celebrated the Belarusian land in Pan Tadeusz. Other foundational writers were Vincent Dunin Marcinkevich and Franciszek Bohushevich. In the 20th century, newspapers like Nasha Niva united major writers like Yanka Kupala and Jakub Kolas.
And let's not forget Maxim Bogdanovich, considered the founder of modern Belarusian literature. He died of tuberculosis at only 25, but his work, close to European symbolism, focused deeply on personal feelings and existential themes.
During the Soviet period and the Second World War, the war became a dominant theme. Vasil Bykov became famous for his psychological war novels and Vladimir Karatkevich for historical prose. Today, Belarus even celebrates the Day of Belarusian Written Language.
Before we conclude the cultural part, let's look at cinema and mass media. In the Soviet period, film was ideology, education and propaganda, right?
Absolutely. And after the 1917 revolution, Lenin considered cinema the most important of the arts, because it was able to reach an illiterate population. In the 1920s, the government created Sovkino to control production. And during this period, Agit trains and Agit ships, that were mobile propaganda units, traveled across the Soviet territory with projectors to bring films to remote villages. By doing this, they were literally moving ideological laboratories.
Directors like Sergei Eisenstein revolutionized film language with montage techniques. But under Stalin, cinema had to conform to socialist realism. Films portrayed heroic workers and the triumph of socialism.
Did cinema experience the same cultural crisis as literature after 1991?
Yes, state funding collapsed and the ideological framework disappeared overnight. The 1990s were marked by economic instability. In recent years, Russian media consumption has shifted toward commercial television. The most diffuse programs are romantic and melodramatic soap operas.
And media regulation heavily protects traditional family values. Recently, in 2021, significant fines were imposed on the channel Muz TV for promoting non-traditional relationships, and the supermarket chain, Vkusville, faced financial penalties for an ad featuring a same-sex family.
So today's popular media tells us that contemporary culture reflects fragmentation, commercialization, and a search for identity, negotiation between past grandeur and present realities.
Identity isn't just shaped by books and art. There's another space where national character becomes visible physically, and that's sport.
Oh yes, in the arena, rivalry becomes physical. Strength, discipline, strategy, and resilience play out right in front of your eyes.
And the fascinating thing is that all three of these nations inherited the exact same grueling training system. The old Soviet school, built entirely on relentless discipline and collective pride. Yet they evolved into three very different sporting identities.
Let's start with combat sports. Anastasia, how does the fighting philosophy change when you cross these borders?
Well, Russia represents absolute power and brute force. Just look at Greek-Roman wrestling and Alexander Karyelin, nicknamed the Experiment. He went completely undefeated for 13 years. 887 wins and only 2 losses.
That is terrifying, but Ukraine answered that overwhelming force with intellect and heart. In the 2000s, the heavyweight boxing division was the private property of the Klitschko brothers. They both held PhDs and dismantled opponents with surgical precision. And today, Alexander Usyk, so-called the Cat, proved that Ukrainian heart and dancing footwork can knock down Russian giants.
What about Belarus?
Belarusians are the pit bulls of MMA. Andrei Arlovsky put Belarus on the map in the UFC with a super gritty style that never quits.
Which is saying a lot, because in modern MMA, Russia is practically a cheat code thanks to the mountains of Dagestan. Khabib Nurmagomedov and Islam Makhachev completely smother everyone on the ground. As the saying goes, send him to 3 years to Dagestan and forget.
Let's move to the natural elements. When we talk about ice, is there even a competition? Honestly, no, Russia rules the ice. The legacy of the Red Machine is alive with goaltender Vladislav Tretiak and Alexander Ovechkin. In figure skating, Irina Rodnina went an entire decade without losing a single competition.
But what about gymnastics? Russia set the gold standard there too.
Oh, absolutely. Look at Lyudmila Turisheva in 1975. She dismounted the uneven bars, and as soon as her feet hit the mat, the entire apparatus literally crashed to the floor right behind her. She didn't even flinch. She calmly saluted the judges and walked off. Total composure.
But Ukrainians took to the skies. Sergei Bubka broke the pole vault world record 35 times and was the first to clear 6 meters. And in gymnastics, Ukraine had Lilia Podkopayeva, who combined power and ballet-like grace to become the 96th Olympic champion.
But what about Belarus?
Belarus is the realm of iron and precision. At the 92nd Barcelona Olympics, Vitaly Sherba won an unbelievable 6 gold medals. In winter sports, Daria Domracheva took home 4 Olympic golds in biathlon.
We can't discuss athletic dominance without mentioning Russian ballet, which requires exactly the same grueling physical preparation.
True. Anna Pavlova was the icon of the early 20th century, famous for The Dying Swan. Then we have Vaslav Nijinsky, star of Diaghilev's Ballet Russes, famous for lips defying gravity in Petrushka and his controversial choreography for The Rite of Spring. Before, his career was cut short by schizophrenia.
During the Cold War, dances became global superstars. Rudolf Nureyev completely flipped the script, making the male role a magnetic protagonist. His defection to the West in 1961 led to his legendary partnership with Margot Fonteyn. Then came Mikhail Baryshnikov. Born in Latvia to Russian parents, he was a soloist for the Kirov before asking for political asylum in the US in 1974. He directed the American Ballet Theatre and even made the leap into Hollywood.
And today, the explosive Russian tradition survives with dancers like Natalia Osipova, bringing vibrant athletic energy to classical roles like Giselle at the Royal Ballet in London.
Finally, let's take a look at football and tennis. Imagine if these three sister nations were still playing as one team today.
They would be unstoppable. A football squad with the legendary Russian Lev Yashin in goal, Belarusian Alexander Gleb in midfield, and Ukrainians Andriy Shevchenko up top.
It really is a shame they're rivals now. In tennis, for years, Maria Sharapova was the undisputed Russian queen, winning Wimbledon at 17 with lethal buzzer and power and a predatory mindset. But lately, Belarusians like Arina Sabalenka and Victoria Azarenka have dragged Belarus to the top of the Grand Slam rankings, completely stealing the spotlight. Sabalenka's power rivals Serena Williams in her prime.
3 nations, 3 flags, one massive shared obsession with greatness. Ultimately, Russia chose dominance, Ukraine chose heart, and Belarus chose precision.
Exactly, now they're fierce rivals, frenemies, fighting for the podium. But under the different flags, there's still a deeply shared legacy built on iron discipline.
Well said. Thank you everyone for listening. Next time we'll dig even deeper into the stories that bind and divide these nations. See you!